Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the fifth and the final day of the CIP Forum 2020. Today's theme is professionalization, and more specifically, we'll focus primarily on the development of the IP profession over the past 20 years and look forward for the next 20 years as the role of IP and the related management capabilities are impacted by the changes in technology, markets, and even geopolitics. To set the stage, we welcome our chairpersons, Suzanne Harrison and Dan McCurdy. Welcome back, guys. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Bo. Seriously, when Suzanne and I were trying to figure out what we were going to say as we opened up this particular session, the first thing we had to do was to practice many times how you actually say professionalization. It's one of those words that's virtually impossible to say quickly. And so we reverted to the old-fashioned way of thinking about it and went to the dictionary to figure out what professionalization is at least defined to be, which is, and I'll read it, the action or process of giving an occupation, activity, or group professional qualities, typically by increasing training or raising required qualifications. And so when we started to reflect on what that means with respect to IP, the IP profession, we decided that we should look backwards, since this is, after all, the 20th anniversary of the CIP forums. We should look backwards and reflect on what we thought 20 years ago we should be doing with respect to the profession, and then figure out what we have achieved and what we haven't, and then talk just for a few minutes about what we think about the future as we go forward. So we're going to start looking backward with respect to accomplishments, and I'm going to turn it over to my friend Suzanne to talk about that portion first. Suzanne?
Thanks, Dan. So I will say that in 1988, when I worked with David Teese on the first consulting project for intellectual capital management, I think neither David nor I really understood that a profession was going to come out of this. So it's sort of surreal to be looking back to think about all the things we've accomplished. So, and actually, to be fair, we've accomplished a lot as an industry, right? We understand and have it recognized that IP is both a legal and a business asset. We can actually quantify and reduce IP risk. We, clearly, the money-grubbing people that we are understand how to use patents as a product and have been very successful at that. We keep patent litigation lawyers and IP litigation lawyers fully booked, so no problems with that. We've gone through several cycles of patents being really strong, patents being really weak, and we're sort of, that pendulum is coming back to more of a middle ground, hopefully, in that series and that cycle that we've done. We've created a whole bunch of tools to help us understand and visualize and see patents and use them as data. And we've really, over time, had many debates over what is patentable, and what is patentable, that definition has changed over the course of the last 20 years.
So when we reflect on what we wanted to accomplish and haven't yet fully accomplished, one of the things that comes to my mind is that having been both in large companies in IP functions, as well as worked alongside large companies and their IP functions, one of the things that I always recognize is that, notwithstanding our really amazingly good inclinations, it's sometimes very, very hard to reach beyond that which gets thrown onto our plates every single day. To a large extent, a lot of our time as professionals is reacting to litigation, to other challenges, both patents, allegations of trade secret thefts, or actually people who have taken our trade secrets, issues around trademark infringement, and so on. And that almost by definition means that we spend so much of our time reacting to things being thrown at us, it becomes very, very difficult for us to step back and figure out how we can actually better use our skills and our talents to help guide the business. Because in the end, particularly for those of us who work for businesses or alongside businesses, the objective that we have is to help the business be more successful. And since most businesses make their money by offering products or services, it seems to us that, and we talked about this 20 years ago, that one of the things that great IP professions do well, which means the professionals that are within them, is that we think carefully about and become extraordinarily knowledgeable about the major business issues that confront most of the major groups within that company. And so I think that for many of us, because of these demands on our time and our organizations, we simply still remain on the periphery of many of the kinds of discussions that go on that are the core business discussions that are happening within companies. And we just have to figure out how to do that better. And I'm sure that the panel can talk and will talk about this more, but I believe that that sits right at the very top of the list of what we need to do better. The second thing that we need to do better is we still spend an inordinate amount of time and money trying to resolve particularly patent disputes, and litigation continues to drive the action. Too many of us experience times when it would seem to us as intellectual property and as patent professionals that a license makes good sense and the price seems to be right. And yet, for most of us, we have to go to business units and persuade them that this is the right time to resolve the dispute at a price that would save lots of time and friction, and reduce that friction and therefore the amount of money and effort being spent on it. And yet, we hear too frequently, well, have we been sued yet? And if the answer is no, then the next question might be, well, has anyone else been sued yet? And if the answer to that is no, then there doesn't seem to be any real reason to move forward, knowing that if we could find a way, individually or collectively, we kind of favor collectively to resolve these kinds of disputes, then we could take an enormous amount, probably billions of dollars, out of costs that could be avoided by removing some of this friction in these. Lots of things that we, that I would say is patent matters get an inordinate amount of attention, largely because once you get a complaint or an allegation of infringement, particularly when a complaint has been served, we have to respond to them. And there is real no choice except to lose. But that might come as a profession at the cost of giving the kinds of attention that we otherwise might be able to bring to other significant matters like trademarks and trade secrets and copyrights, which might be able to be used to both improve the business operation of the company, the financials of the company, and certainly help protect those assets, many of which are obviously equally, or in the case of trade secrets, more important than the patents that we hold. And the last thing that I think that we all know we haven't done as well at as we should as a profession is to significantly diversify the the staffs with which we work. And we all know, but we're having a hard time figuring out how to solve it, how to achieve the level of diversity that we all know is necessary to make our organizations more effective and to make them better match the world in which our businesses operate.
Oh man, there have been plenty of obstacles. Dan and I went back and forth on this slide because there were so many. So we picked a few, and I really think Joff is going to hit on a lot more on the panel. But I think first and foremost, as an industry, we have no real understanding of the relationship between invention and innovation, right? I mean, which seems to be quite fundamental to everything. And yet we have no definitive studies, we have no data. What we have is belief. And when you have belief, it's hard for people to come and agree if their beliefs don't match. Two, after all this time, we still don't have any clear understanding of how to define FRAND collectively, how those rates should be determined, and what part of the supply chain should even pay them. So, again, that's just more friction in the system leading to more litigation, which you would think that after all this time, we would be invested in solving these problems, and yet we haven't. We hear a lot about whether the IP ecosystem is fair. And fair is, again, one of those words that's a belief. Until we define what fair means to everyone, then we don't have a clear yardstick to really understand what that looks like for everyone. Should companies be putting IP costs into their product costing systems? And if they do, should it be what the market can bear, or should it be what rate should that be at? Again, since we don't have that definition of FRAND, we don't have yet a yardstick to determine that. It's interesting that intellectual property management is not a function, right? It is a group that contains R&D, IP, and business people. And those three functions actually need to work together in a system to make a series of decisions in order to get the most value out of their intangibles. And yet we don't have an education system that actually values that. In business school, we don't train people on intellectual property and what that means. We might do that in engineering or some technical degrees, but not all. And we certainly don't do that in law school. And so, it is these programs like CIP who are actually bringing all of these dimensions together and teaching them as a business issue that will help us better train people, new people coming into the profession, but also as a way to train existing people who need further education to become better business people once they master what the IP is. And again, it just makes you realize we don't have a certification of what it means to be an intellectual property management professional. Oh, we've tried over the years. LES tried something, and a number of others have tried something, but for whatever reason, it hasn't stuck. So clearly, it is something that we still need to find a way to define and integrate into companies so that we better understand the kinds of people that we're looking for. Okay, great.
So
there you go.
There we go. What should we focus on over the next few years on our way to the next 20? I'm certainly hoping that we make more progress over the next few years on some of these issues because they are so critical. All business, of course, in the end is looking more than anything else for predictability. And businesses can deal with virtually anything. What they don't deal with very well are surprises. And it's one of the challenges, of course, about IP is we are, if nothing else, full of surprises. The industry itself is unpredictable. Every week, when we think we finally understand the way that IP and works, there will be a change in the law or a change in regulation or some kind of nuance in terms of new terms and conditions or approaches that people put into licensing discussions. I frequently have described this as playing a 6-dimensional chess game where the rules change virtually every day. And that does not favor the ability to predict. And so we really can, and I think must, as an industry, focus on how can we make things more predictable and how can we reduce a lot of this extraordinarily costly friction that we face. And some of that is going to be behavioral, and it's going to lead to, I'm going to take to the third bullet on this chart, and then I'll come back to the second one. But the third bullet, I think, is very key to this, because one of the things that we as a profession must do is to become much more integrated into the business functions of our companies. And I think that that goes both directions. We frequently, when we hire into our IP organizations, we hire people with the same kinds of skills over and over again. They have to have deep, long experience in patent licensing. They have to be trained as IP attorneys, whether they're prep, pros, or litigation, and so on, or they have to be deeply experienced trademark lawyers. But what we tend to pay less attention to is hiring people into our functions that are very deeply connected into the existing business organizations of our companies. And who speak the same language as the business people speak. IP has its own vocabulary. Business people don't speak that vocabulary, that language very well. And generally they then look at us as, oh, there comes an IP person, must be a problem. What we need to do is to work harder and better at being part of the solution to the major business problems that business executives are focused on. So if you're a head of a product unit, she might very well be focused on various supply chain issues and how to figure out major issues that are going to disrupt her supply chain. And we as IP professionals have a lot to say about those kinds of things. And yet, if we're not at the table hearing on a regular basis in each business unit's business updates and their strategy sessions, if we are not included in those and have a deep enough grounding in them to understand what the hell they're talking about, we can't possibly be able to understand how we might be able to suggest a solution. An example of that would be, we all know that greater than 90% of the time, if you are found to be infringing a patent in China, you will be enjoined from not only the making, using, or selling of that product in China, but from the exporting of that good. And some of the supply chain issues that might then confront a business unit is that exact same problem, which is we have to figure out how to avoid an injunction of parts that are critical to our supply chain for a product, that if there's an injunction barring its export from China, we may have a major global crisis in terms of product. That's just one example of why we must be deeply and fully integrated into these discussions on a regular basis inside of every business unit, because many of them will have IP elements, either to prevent a problem or to help solve a problem. And there are mechanisms, but we've got to have people on our teams who know how to solve that. On the second bullet, just a couple of brief words around this transparency. All of us for decades have been trying to figure out how we could get better transparency with respect to costs of various IP transactions. Kent, who will be obviously on this next panel, has been trying to get transparency in terms of a lot of patent stuff. RPX at one point had a program that was trying to also get pricing. And the problem is that in the patent arena, licensors don't want to disclose the information and licensees don't want to disclose the information. But we really ought to get together as a profession and in a very pro-competitive way, figure out how we can come up with this magical, blue book that will help people understand what is a reasonable price with respect to patents or other intellectual property licenses or sales, because it would help with this friction problem enormously. The last is that I have, and then Suzanne's going to say a few words on a couple of additional ideas, is that I believe that we can make dramatic improvement in opening up the channels of communication between IP owners and potential licensees, whoever they are, whether they're other companies, whether they are NPEs, whether they're research institutions, whether they're universities. It's much easier to resolve disputes when you have at least cordial relationship. You may not need to be friends, but you need to be at least acquaintances, because that gives you the context that when difficult issues come forward, it gives you a mechanism to try and help resolve them. And that's one of the things, frankly, that I've spent a good bit of my career on, is trying to keep those channels of communication open, both among operating companies as well as with other patent owners, that even though they might be bothersome, having that relationship is going to help you resolve disputes and issues that arise much more so than if you're sort of acting in isolation. Suzanne?
Sure. This is just one of those things. So let's all be clear. Not all IP is equally valuable, and we need to stop pretending like it is, right? And for many of us, it is a small percentage that's actually valuable. So clean your closets, don't pay the money for those things if you don't need it, and figure out what you want to do. But it's also important to recognize which ones are valuable and why are they valuable. Are they valuable to you for your business? Are they valuable because they read on someone else? Whatever that value is, whatever that context is, you need to understand that and be very clear which ones hold the key to those value drivers. We need to continue efforts to harmonize the IP ecosystem. I mean, you heard with Andrei Iancu and the gentleman from the EPO, this is becoming a global system, right? And we are going to have more and more, I guess, efforts to more harmonize those systems together. So you should be aware of that. You should think about what the implications for your business are and how you think about that, and even have a say in what that might look like. And then Dan, I'm gonna turn this last one over to you because you're so passionate about it, right?
Well, I am, because I have a view which everybody excels if their job is doing something that they are extraordinarily passionate about. That as long as you're passionate and you're doing that which you're passionate about, you'll have fun. So we can all dramatically improve the pace at which we make progress in the coming years if we take on tasks that we really enjoy. So let's have fun with this. Let's be passionate about it, And all I can say is, speaking of passion, I can turn it over to Joff now. And thank you, Suzanne, for all your comments. We can turn it over to Joff, and I can guarantee you that this upcoming panel is going to be a lot of fun, and there will be passion.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everyone.